They buried him with their own hands, 6 feet under in dry desert soil. The town swore they'd never see his face again. But last night, hooves echoed down the main street, and when folks peered through their shutters, it was him, the cowboy they buried a year ago. This is the story of a dead man riding back into town. It was sundown when Jeb Carter rode into town for the last time. Not that anyone noticed. All eyes were on the setting sun bleeding across the jagged peaks to the west. For 6 long months, this had been their routine, watching the sun set and the moon rise over the mesas. The only sounds were the sighing wind and the creak of the saloon doors as Jeb pushed them open. Jeb wasn't just any man. They called him Jeb Carter, a gunfighter, outlaw and rancher who wore his anger like a second skin. His face was a roadmap of past run-ins with the law, and his fists were as heavy as the Colt revolvers strapped to his hips. That's why most folks in the western town of Redemption kept their distance, except for a few. When the mood hit him, Jeb would stride into the saloon, slam a whiskey on the counter, and tell tales of his adventures on the range, spinning yarns so wild and tall that even he didn't know where fact ended and fiction began. At least that's what the folks in town believed until the day the legend died outside the old church. Every man in town remembered that day clearly, the day they lowered Jeb into the grave and covered him with dirt. It had been a Sunday much like any other. Birds chirping, sun shining, not a cloud in the sky. Then suddenly 2 shots rang out, shattering the peace. One from Jeb's trusty Colt, and another that tore a hole through Jeb's chest. They found him slumped against the church steps, eyes wide and staring, a crimson stain blooming on his shirt. Nobody knew who'd shot him, but they all watched as the body was prepared and placed in a coffin, 6 feet under in the dry desert earth. So when that same man rode through town last night, his eyes hidden beneath a dusty brim, his horse black as midnight, no one dared speak. The sheriff, a big lug named Clem, swore his hand trembled on the badge pinned to his chest. Doors locked, curtains drawn. But one woman couldn't look away. Her name was Clara May. She was the widow of a ranch hand Jeb once killed in cold blood during a card game. In the flickering lamplight, she watched the stranger dismount. Her gaze locked onto his face, etched with the lines of hardship and loss, framed by unruly black hair. His eyes, though concealed by the shadows of his hat, seemed to bore into her very soul. As he walked towards her house, each step echoing the beat of her racing heart. When his horse stopped outside her door, she whispered one word: impossible. He knocked, slow, heavy, like a coffin lid closing. Clara May's heart thundered in her chest as the sound echoed through her lonely cabin. Every sane soul in town stayed silent, pretending not to hear the horse outside their door, but she couldn't help herself. She opened it. There he stood, gaunt and grave like a specter risen from the earth, his eyes hollow, his skin ashen. His lips, when he finally moved them, rasped like wind through a grave. "You kept something of mine?" He reached out a finger, long and bony, and tapped the lantern she held. Its flames sputtered, casting dancing shadows around them. She wanted to scream, to bolt, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. "How?" she croaked, her voice brittle. "How can you be alive? You were dead. They buried you." Smiled then, a sad, mirthless twist of his lips. "Seems that wasn't the case, does it?" His eyes met hers, bottomless pools, reflecting the flickering lantern light. She wanted to turn away, but something compelled her to keep looking into those eyes, as if she could find answers in their depths. Suddenly, he took a step forward. Time seemed to stop. Her breath hitched, the lantern swayed in her trembling hand. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Don't you recognize me, Clara May?"
Us.
Whose voice, though raspy, held a familiarity that sent shivers down her spine. "I thought you were dead," she breathed. He closed the distance between them, and for a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire in the hearth behind them. "Seems some of us come back from the dead," he said, his voice barely audible. His gaze seemed to pierce through her defenses, stripping away the years, leaving her raw and exposed. She struggled to speak, to formulate a coherent thought, but fear had frozen her tongue. His eyes flicked to the corner of the room, and she followed his gaze to see an old, ornately carved wooden box sitting on a shelf. Memories flooded back, sharp and sudden. The weight of the past crashing down on her. The realization dawned on her, hitting her like a physical blow. She knew what he was after, what had brought him back from the grave, quite literally.
Oh.
In that moment, the air grew heavy with unspoken words and hidden truths. His eyes, she realized, were filled not with anger or vengeance, but with a deep, bone-chilling sadness. In the small hours of the morning, when the moon hung heavy in the ink-black sky, a shape was seen moving through the deserted streets of Redemption. It was the cowboy, now cloaked in darkness, his face hidden in the shadows of his Stetson. He walked with a strange, otherworldly grace that sent chills down the spines of those who witnessed him. As he passed by, faces peering from behind curtains and shutters, eyes wide with disbelief and fear. Some gasped, others recoiled, but all remained frozen in place, unable to tear their gaze away from the apparition before them. His presence, both familiar and unsettling, stirred a whirlwind of emotions in their hearts. As the cowboy approached the jail, a faint light spilling out from beneath the door, Sheriff Clem's face, pale and etched with worry, appeared in the opening. The sight of the undead gunfighter before him sent a wave of realization crashing over Clem. Suddenly, the whispers in town made sense, the rumors of strange occurrences in the night. This was the source, the Ghost Rider returned. But why? What did he want? Before Clem could respond, the cowboy spoke, his voice a low, gravelly echo. "I need your gun, Clem." He stepped closer, and in the dim light, the sheriff saw the stark hollows of his cheeks, the ghostly pallor of his skin. It was the face of a man who'd journeyed through the gates of death and back. Clem swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his badge. "What are you talking about? What do you want with a gun?" The cowboy's eyes, dark and fathomless, seemed to bore into the sheriff's soul. "To put an end to this," he rasped, his gaze distant, as if seeing things beyond the realm of the living. "It's the only way, Clem. You understand?" The wind howled outside, mimicking the turmoil in the sheriff's heart. His hand trembled as he reached for his holster. Should he shoot? Would that lay the ghost to rest? Or was he merely delaying the inevitable? Back at the Widow May's cabin, the remnants of the story began to unfold. As the morning light crept in through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, she found herself face to face with the memory of her past, the ghost of Jeb Carter. Surrounded by the debris of their encounter, she pieced together the fragments of a tale that defied logic and reason. Her fingers traced the outline of the old wooden box on the shelf, its ornate carvings mocking her with their beauty. Inside lay the secret that bound her to Jeb, the secret that had brought him back. Not as a vengeful spirit, but as a man burdened by unfinished business. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the dusty floor, she knew what she had to do. The ghost of Jeb Carter was not her enemy. He was a man seeking closure, a soul trapped between worlds. And she, Clara May, was the key to his final journey. Outside, the whispers in town grew louder. The sheriff's weathered face creased with worry as he heard the townsfolk's terrified murmurs. They spoke of a ghost rider, of a gravedigger's curse, but he knew better. There was a story behind this, a truth buried deeper than any grave. With a resolute nod, he turned back to the task at hand. He would face whatever lay before him, unravel the mystery of the undead cowboy. As he stepped out into the harsh glare of the noon sun, he knew he wasn't just walking toward the jail. He was walking toward the heart of a mystery that had laid dormant for a year. The grave outside the old church was empty. If you listen real close when the wind howls across the prairie, you can still hear hooves coming closer.